Welcome to the TJ Mauldin Leadership Podcast, where we talk about life, leadership, and the gospel. Hey, welcome to the TJ Mauldin Leadership Podcast. I'm so glad that you have joined me today. Today is a really, really special day for me. One of my favorite people, the staff knows this, but I call Marla my spirit animal, all right? The way that she runs her organization and her personality, we connected in 2009, and I've been so honored to see Marla, to know Marla, to look in on her ministry and life, her and Alan, and what they've been able to accomplish for Christ is quite significant. So this conversation is a great joy for me. The day that I decided to marry my wife, I was actually in Jamaica at Ace in one of the hotel rooms. So it is very important for me to have this conversation. So with that, I just want to introduce Marla. Marla, I'm glad you are here.
Oh, thank you. It's a little bit colder up here than Jamaica, but thanks a lot. It's good to be here. It's like coming home.
Absolutely.
And by the way, I was trying to think, what room were you in? I know it wasn't 114, was it?
No.
Okay, that's the honeymoon room.
It was not that room. No, I was actually down. It's interesting. I was down on a trip. It was my first time ever going out of the country for the cause of Christ. I was leading worship.
Realize that. Yeah.
And I'd never been anywhere before, and I was leading, and I was thinking about do I date this girl a long time? Do I, should I marry her? Should I contemplate marriage? And Jay, our friend, Jay was like, hey man, she's really incredible. And if you don't love her, there's a lot of dudes out there that would love to love somebody like her. So you better make up your mind. And I was like, yes, some hard truth,
that was
bro.
it.
Yeah, that's good.
I could see Jay saying that.
Yeah, he totally said it in that way. So Marla, listen, there's a lot of things that I want to talk about today if we can. But I would love to, if you would kind of just start at the beginning. I'd love to hear a little bit of your early life and you meeting God. Like what, because we're going to crescendo into ACE and the organization that you're the founder of and that you lead. But I really want to get to know you a little more as we go through this conversation.
Oh, well, thanks. I have to cue my memory because this is the first year I'm actually on Medicare. So that, that tells you a lot, okay? Yeah. It's funny because I was raised in a great conservative background and went to a Baptist church. Grew up in the environment of really knowing, hearing the Word of God all the time. I think probably the greatest part though was I didn't see that exactly lived out at home, and it started off rough. Had a major, we call it stubborn in Jamaica, but I would call it a rebelliousness to anything that was within the lines of things. So when I turned 18, I left. I just said, that's enough. And I was forced to go to church all the time, and which now I look back and I think that's good because I can draw off of a lot of stuff now that I have a whole different mindset. Sure. At 26, I remember I've been married 3 times, so I want everybody to kind of know that. So when I skip around, it's not the man I'm married to now, and you're looking at him thinking, oh my goodness, what kind of guy are you? But I married the first man that came along, and at 21, and he had he had a lot of drugs, a drug problem, consequently died of a heroin overdose. That was after, though, he left me for our Coke dealer. And so that kind of life for me went from being overly protective, which I think sometimes parents can do that, to just rip-roaring loose. I remember I was in the day of evangelists where you turn on TV and every time you turn it on, they're asking you for money and on and on and on. But there was this one show that I worked for the airlines during that time, and I was the only one at home, and I would turn it on because they always gave good news. which was the 700 Club. Now, I don't know if that guy's even alive anymore.
Is that guy's name Pat Robertson
Yeah,
or something?
that's him. Yes, he's still alive.
I think he's still like
I just remember
through.
he was kind of saying some stuff a couple years ago that was
wild, man.
like, kind of dementified. But anyway, he just kept saying, God loves you, has a purpose for your life. And I kept waiting for him to ask for money, which is good that it wasn't his marathon, because they do this marathon thing. And he never did. And it was always good stuff. And he used to say, all you need to do is just, God has such a great purpose for you. And he's pursuing you. And all you really need to do is just come to him and on any terms and just say, I need help. And I remember one day I was coming home from work. I was working the night shift at the airport. And it was March 21st, 1984. And we had this, I don't even know if this station is still around in Atlanta, 96 Rock. And I was rocking out all the way down. And I thank goodness they didn't do drug tests back then, because I would have been fired. But I was just clicking along, and my life was a mess. Now, I don't want to tell you how much I weigh now, but back then I weighed like 117 pounds because I was just doing so much coke. And I remember I pulled over, the lady on 96 Rock said something like, "Welcome to the first day of spring. What are you going to do new in your life?" And at that very moment, it was like God just grabbed me. There was no one in the car. I pulled over. I just started crying, which I don't cry a lot, but I just started crying, and I just said, "God, I'm a mess. I'm just a mess. I don't know if you'd want someone like me, but if you want someone like me, I'm available." I mean, I just remember that. And instantly, it was like this, I don't want to say the whole car filled with clouds and there were angels in a choir behind me, but it was just all of a sudden that peace that passes all understanding.
Yeah.
Saying, "Well, thank you, Marla. Now you get in the back seat and let me drive. Let me bring out that good in you." And I can't explain that to anybody, really on any other terms other than that's my vocabulary of what happened. And all of a sudden, I just had a whole new vision. And it was to go back to the house where I would see my husband. And we used to have all these parties on Friday nights, and who knows who stayed over the next day. And I remember going in and seeing him rolling a joint, and which was our normal thing. And I walked in and I just said, "You're not going to believe what happened to me." And now he was, I guess, 8 years older than me. And he says, "What?" And I am not one that goes off the deep end. I know that sounds odd, but I really am not. And I'm a very logical thinker, even though I get excited about a lot of things. And I sat down and I told him what happened. And I'll never forget, he looked at me, he stopped rolling the joint, he looked at me, and he said, "If you're going to go that route, we're not going to really have a marriage." And like the optimist I am, I thought, well, that's okay. I'll just, hold out, wait. Well, within 3 months, he had left me and got his or our Coke dealer pregnant, and I found out all about that. And that's just a whole lot of drama. So I was single again and went back to a church in Atlanta that I had been going to, before I was 18.
Can I stop you for just a second? I think it's really significant and interesting. One, I've never heard this part of your story, so I'm really grateful that you're sharing it. But for me, it shows the significance and the power of God that you were at a place where you said, "I have decided to follow Jesus." And it wasn't because there was anything in it for you, right? Like there was a relationship with Jesus, but the return, the blessing, the TV evangelist idea, none of that was in your heart or your mind. You had a life that you had been content with, a lifestyle that you'd been content with, a partner that you had been content with. And so to follow Jesus for you meant costing you everything that you had known up to that point. And so for me, like sitting on this side of the table, seeing that Jesus, if the world could just see that Jesus, that if it costs me everything, he's worthy of following. So I'm so grateful that you shared that. But back to your church.
No, I didn't realize. Well, and it is true. And I think that's why sometimes God tells you to do the faith walk, because for me, I would have been too weak to know that this is the beginning of a journey. And that journey is fantastic, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
And so I went back to church. I hadn't been in church for who knows how long. And back then, I say back in those days, it was just, they found out that I'd been divorced and asked me, would I not go to the singles class, but would I go to the singles again class? Now, for most people, to me, that would have been, I'm done, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
But, when God's working in your life, I think sometimes you just have to see above people's intention.
Yeah.
I tell people they were, the deacons that came to visit me, they actually, in those days, they would come to your house. Were very sincere, good people. They were just sincerely wrong.
Right.
And I tell people there in this culture particularly where there's hate or no hate,
right.
I mean, we got to give some grace here. There's a lot of gray areas that we can move in.
Yeah.
And so I had a Presbyterian friend, and he was a paid soloist from right down the street. And I was sharing with him because he was there. We were playing some volleyball and some stuff with other people. And He's pulled me aside and he said, Marla, why don't you just come down to my church? Yeah, I know I go to church here, but they pay me to sing. I'm a soloist over here. Why don't you come to my church? Because they'll take anybody. And I thought, well, okay.
I think that's a compliment.
Yeah.
Is that an invite?
And that was North Avenue Presbyterian.
Okay.
And they are still there. And back then, they had a pastor, an associate pastor, and his wife, Bill and Carol, took me right in, and for 1 year took me to their home, invited me to their house on a Wednesday night, fed me, and just discipled me in the Word.
Wow.
And it was just the coolest thing. And so that's kind of how I began to grow. And through that, I had met my second husband. I'd been single 7 years. He was in the commodities business, and I had decided I was never going to do drugs, never going to be around drugs. You know how you do that. You go from being down in the bottom all the way to the top. And so married this guy, and he seemed like a good guy all along. I should have seen things happening, but he had sold his company. He had a commodities company, and he was 30 and wanted to go to Jamaica. And so, I'm like, sure, I'm ready to go to Jamaica. Never been to Jamaica. And so we applied through the Presbyterian denomination at the time. And I always wondered, and this isn't to put down what was put in place, but I always wondered how we had to fill out all these papers of who we were and our education, which I was just a ticket to ride. He was the one that had all the ag stuff. And they had a half of a page that wanted to know about your spiritual life. And, at that point in my life, I had like 500 pages because I just wanted to really tell everybody. And so, we wrote that, ended up being the country directors for the Presbyterian denomination for the Caribbean. And that was a 2-year term to replace the existing directors. So we went down there. That was in 1988. And we were supposed to be training under the current directors who were going to be going back to the States. We got there, and within 24 hours, we don't know what happened, but this guy had a total nervous breakdown. And all I remember is we were driving their vehicle, the company vehicle, with them to the airport, and he was laying down, and he had this big pilot bag, those big bags, and he hands it off, and he says, "Here's everything you need to know. I'm so sorry." And he left. And that was it. And that was our training.
That was your day one?
Yeah.
Day one in Jamaica was a
Day
nervous
one.
breakdown, a bag full of documents,
Yep.
and they leave on a plane?
And they leave. And then that summer, of course, I was so arrogant and prideful. Well, we can do this, and so was my husband at the time. And we made tremendous mistakes, had probably about 200 to 250 volunteers coming from the presbytery. And back then, though, this is how God used it so moving forward, and I see it now. Churches mean well, particularly what I have seen, but they want to stay within their lane. They don't want to get outside the lane of their religion and the line of denomination. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but I never saw that in God's book. I never saw that when Jesus says, all right, we're all going to stay Jewish here, Yeah. And so after serving, what they would do, they'd send teams down to paint and hold what they call backyard Bible studies. We would call it BBS. And the church would swell to 150 people. And it was a party. I mean, we had the guitars going and the balloons, throwing out candy, giving away our shoes. And when the time came, we took tons of pictures of beautiful children. And then we would say our middle class lingo, and that is, hey, if you're ever in Georgia, call me. Hey, if you ever get a chance or you're coming through, let's do lunch. Not knowing that these people not only didn't have any ID, which the majority of them that we worked with at that time did not. They didn't have birth certificates. They didn't have passports. And if they had any money, it wouldn't be used to do any of that.
You used a word 2 trips ago when I was down in St. Mary. You used a word that struck me, and you called it poverty tourism.
Yes.
You said that the church in America has really, in a lot of ways, sponsored poverty tourism rather than digging into a community, dropping anchors, putting down some roots, and building up a community from not just the spiritual aspect, but families, relationships, commerce, the whole 9 yards. It's just poverty tourism. We go down to make and we're jumping ahead a little bit, but
no,
we go down to make ourselves feel good that we've done something rather than invest into a community for the glory of God.
Yes.
And so will you tell, and I don't know if you're planning to tell this, but the moment where there was a moment, and I remember you've shared this with the groups multiple times where you were like, I'm not doing this anymore.
Well, there were a lot of those moments. I think one of the key moments was when I went back after churches would leave. And I think missions does impact Americans.
Sure.
How long it lasts, I don't know. I don't know in what comparison, but it is poverty tourism. They love to get their passports stamped and love to tell people how they did this, and this. But when you ask them, well, have you talked to them recently? Do you stay in touch with them? And it's always the great American term, and I have had to break myself of this too. Well, I'm just too busy. And busy seems to be the key word. I'm just so busy. I will never forget when over time in that 2-year period when groups would come, after they left, and I would go and pick up stuff and go to the church service, the church was back down to 14 people. Maybe 8 of them were mothers. The rest were children and one old man in the corner is what I say. No growth, no sustainability, same old, same old. And then because Jamaicans are so smart, and I always say this, that if I had to choose a survivalist, and I know there are other countries, but for me, I would choose a Jamaican because they can survive. And what I saw happening was over time, mothers would bring their children to our VBS, backyard Bible study, and they would dress them down because they realized that Americans are so generous, and we're generous people, that if their daughter didn't have on the right shoes and her dress looked a little dirty, things weren't exactly perfect, Americans, 1 or 2 of them would latch onto that and go, oh, I want to help. And they would get more items. which in turn created what we would call a welfare entitlement system, which we know doesn't work.
Right.
And so over time, I began to notice more and more people were dressing down. They were getting more. They would say they needed this. They would get double what they said they needed. And that angered me because now I'm thinking, we've got a bunch of con artists working. Until, and of course, judging was a big part of my nature as well. Until one day the Lord just spoke to my mind and said, desperate people will do desperate things. But it didn't mean that we needed to flow into that. We were creating that. And that's when, after 2 years, unfortunately, we went through a divorce. He ran off with somebody else, and he has since passed away as well. And I was in it back in Georgia for about a year, brokenhearted, thinking, okay, well, I realize now that what we did didn't really have a lot of impact for that side. So God allowed me to create what we call, that was when the internet came around. I'm really showing my age, I know. And God allowed me to create a website and start doing brokering airline seats. That was my background in the group department with the airline I worked with. And back then you could buy blocks of seats and then you sell them to travel agents and things like that. So I started that and just waiting for divorce and all of that, brokenhearted. Got through that, and then the Lord began to say, I want you back in Jamaica. And various churches helped us with that.
And so you're still, so at this point, and this is what, again, I'm coming back to the Jesus part of the story, because it's amazing to me that you left home, right, where you heard about Jesus but did not see Jesus' love patterned in front of you.
Right.
You leave the church, you are in a relationship, you find Christ finds you.
Yeah.
You lose a husband, you walk through that trauma, you are married again, walking into what you feel like is ministry, you're on cloud nine, and now you're back, like, from this mountaintop experience, back in the valley of more trauma and brokenness, and you're still clinging on to Jesus with everything you have. It's just such a beautiful story and reminder that your life, to me, and I'll say this, and we're going to get to so many other things, but it's such a reminder that he really is better. Like, you hear people say, oh, Jesus is better than the mountaintop. Like, the mountaintop's good, but when you get back in the valley, Jesus is better than anything. Yeah. And your life up to this point, and I mean, even so now, we're going to get to Alan, one of my other favorite people in Jamaica, in a few minutes, but your life really does scream Jesus is better. Mm-hmm. Like, you can give me a ministry, you can take it away. You can give me a husband, you can take it away. You can give me riches or wealth, or you can take it away. Jesus is better. So you find yourself heartbroken, but doing this airline deal.
Well, yeah, and I was actually, when you said that Jesus is better, it reminded me, my second husband, we had built a pretty nice house while we were trying to work things out, which didn't work, on Lake Lanier. And I'll never forget, that was my go-to quiet spot out on the dock. I'd sit there, geese would land and everything. And then when the divorce came and I lost the house and lost a lot of things, I'll never forget my last night at that house. I was by myself with my dog, and I sat out on the porch, and I said, God, don't ever let me get so caught up with material things that it hurts when I have to give it up. And he has never let that happen. I tell people, well, if you lost something, it'd be a bad day. But I really had become consumed, without realizing it, of having things, because we live in such a material world here in the States, and I'm right there at the front row. So yes, that was a hard thing. And then because I lost everything, my attorney gave me her dead mother's trailer. Okay, now think about that. Her mother, and this woman didn't know the Lord, but I didn't have a place to live. I didn't want to move into my parents' home. And her mother had just died of cancer, lived in a trailer park, in a senior citizen trailer park on the lake, which sounds a lot better when you say that, on the lake. And I'll never forget, I went from a very high-end lake home to a dead person's trailer. And when I walked in, there was food still in the refrigerator, and her clothes was still in the dryer. And I just said, God, it just doesn't matter. Because I think through that whole thing, God said, but I want to bring out what is eternal, not what can rot in the refrigerator.
Yeah.
So I started that, and that's what really started paving the way for ACE. And I tell people I could have bought a really nice car, but I decided to invest in personal Christian counseling, and I went to counseling for the price of a car.
Yeah.
Because as much as I wanted to say, well, it was all them, there's some things wrong with me if I keep, marrying the wrong people. And stayed single for another 7 years, but I was going back and forth to Jamaica.
So now, in this season, this 7-year back and forth, this is where ACE is birthed.
This
right?
is
this
where
is the
ACE
founding, the heartbeat, the vision,
Yes.
the dream. So now, let's, if we can, just shift into what did that look like, recognizing a calling. Like, okay, I love Jamaica, but I think it's more than just... was there a moment where it was like, I'm going to begin something that I'm going to spend my life doing for the glory of God and for the people of Jamaica?
Wow, that's a big question. 1995, I began to get phone calls from various churches that I had met along the way and had done business with, particularly with Travel Team Brokers. That's the name of the agency. And we still have that. But not like it was.
True.
And, sometimes God will bring people into your life that you weren't expecting. I was getting calls from individuals that would say, you took us to Jamaica. When we went to Jamaica, here or there, we want you to take us back to Jamaica. We don't want to go with so-and-so. We don't want to do this and that. And I'd say, but you don't understand. I'm divorced. And I'm not affiliated with anybody anymore. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And then I got a letter in the mail from a pastor I didn't even know, Pastor Kermit Jones. And they call him Pastor Kermit. I got this letter, and of course, back then, the snail mail, it had been written 2 months earlier.
Wow.
And he was asking and inviting me to come and help him with his churches in St. Mary. Now, before I was in Manchester, which is up in the mountains. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go visit this guy. Now, Delta Airlines had not been flying into Jamaica at all. And my mother retired from Delta. And you asked the question, how do you know it's God? Because the doors just open in incredible ways. And here I am, self-employed, doing this. Delta has had dock space, gate space, they call it, for years and years, meaning they pay something, but they don't fly there. My mother retires from Delta after 27 years. They give my mother an executive package so that all of her children can fly for a minimum fare for the rest of her life.
Wow.
Now, she's on life support right now. We're never going to take her off. No, I'm joking. She's getting ready to go skiing. She's 85. Her and my stepdad in Kentucky. So they're fine. But I told her, we're never taking you off life support.
I'm just glad that everybody in that moment, their heart kind of got went up in their throat, because that is you. Then that's what I love. I'm glad everybody got to see you for a second. Go.
But so I said, sure, I'll come down. And I flew down, and Delta that year, and I may be wrong, it might be the year before, started flying into Montego Bay.
Oh, wow.
So I could go literally back then for $100 round trip and fly in. And of course, I knew Jamaica very well, and I met this pastor, and he was just fantastic. He was from the Pentecostal group. And that kind of was an interesting mix, because I didn't grow up in that route, but at the same time, I'm like, hey, since when does God just go in my life? And so it expanded my bandwidth a lot to kind of get to know those folks.
Awesome.
And so that's how I ended up over there and sitting around eating pizza one day saying, what can we name this? And the whole point of ACE was just to be able to create something that's a win-win. It couldn't be a win for volunteers and not be a win for the people we serve, and vice versa. So we focus in 4 areas, and that's and when I say focus in 4 areas, I do believe that the human being is made up of so many different parts, and I'm sure you've talked about that.
So for you, what was the first thing? There's 4 areas for sure when it comes to ACE that you all center in on. There's education, there's commerce. What was the first thing that you recognized that you saw that kind of launched ACE?
Healthcare. I remember that I had a neighbor who was 27, 28 years old, had a family, and I just remember he had this huge pig. This pig had to be 300-something pounds. And just a side note, he was going to kill the pig one day. I could hear the pig screaming and screaming and screaming, so I turned on the radio, vacuuming my house, going, oh, my gosh. I mean, it went on and on and on and on and on. Finally, it stopped. Next day, I walked through. There's that pig. And I asked him, I said, Keith, I thought you were killing that pig. He goes, well, we tried yesterday. We couldn't get him in the truck. So all that, was because the pig won. But Keith died. He had, I was walking by. He had this huge ball in his mouth. I thought it was like one of those hot balls, fireballs you used to have. And it was an abscessed tooth. And he said, I said, man, what's wrong with your tooth and your mouth? He goes, I have an abscessed tooth. And, of course, in good middle-class language, I said, oh, Keith, you need to get to the dentist. You need to go see. That's pretty bad. There's no dentist. I mean, he didn't have money. That's not insurance. And that's just me being middle-class America. He died. And it went straight to his brain, and he died. And that shook me. To the point that I said, wait a minute, what is going on? So we started healthcare, wellness. And back then, there were no cell phones. You had to call like a gazillion numbers to get through. But I decided that my dentist was going to be the first one to help us. And I just blew his phone up. He wouldn't answer. And I just kept on going until finally he answered. I got him down there. And I happened to mention to a couple people, hey, we're going to have a dentist down here if you need your teeth taken care of. 300 people. I kid you not.
Wow.
It was as far as I could see. We're at my gate the next day. So I had a whole bunch of high school students, and I probably could be sued for this by now, but we just put up lawn chairs. People sat on the ground under banana trees. He was teaching some of the kids how to give Novocaine shots. And he's like, I'm going to lose my license, and I just said, nobody cares, no. So
we're in Jamaica, just shoot them up with a Novocaine and do the dental work, guy.
We had a couple kids that wanted to be dentists, and when they were shooting up oranges, that look in their eye, I was concerned. but they, he went down the row, and he'd pull the teeth. We had a basket, and he'd put the teeth in there and just put gauze. Most of all, that's all it was, because when your teeth and your mouth are not in good shape, it affects your heart and everything else. So we were pulling teeth. And I'll stop with this story with medical, but he pulled this Rasta guy's, Rastafarian is one of the religions there. He had to have been 6'2" on his own, and then his hair all wrapped up made him 7 feet. And he's sitting there in a chair, and Chris Novocaine, one of the kids Novocained his tooth, and when he came through, he pulled it. So as he was going by, I happened to be standing there. The guy grabbed Chris's arm and said, and he was pointing to his front tooth, that they had pulled his front tooth, and the one that had been Novocaine was in the back. Oh. And we're like, oh my goodness, we did that. And we're fumbling to look for that tooth, but it was rotten. And what it made me realize is that when you're in pain, you'll do anything. You'll put up with anything.
Yeah.
So that started our wellness. We now work with the Ministry of Health, so we're not under the radar like we were in the banana trees.
Yeah.
The second impact that had me start thinking we need to do something is I was asked to help at a little basic school. We would call it kindergarten, and elementary school we call primary there. Just to go in, and I brought some books that some people had left, little books. When I walked in, I was in shock. Even though I had lived there for over a year, I hadn't made it down to the school because they all have their cute little uniforms. So you assume that inside it's just as cute. It was rust, gray color walls, these wooden benches that were designed to hold 3 children, and nothing on the wall, dark, and a teacher sitting there and children all lined up. There wasn't a play box. There wasn't anything. And there might have been stuff like that in the cities, but where I was, there wasn't. I just was so shocked that children were growing up in a non-creative environment. And to me, we serve the greatest artist in the entire world. How many people go on vacation and go, that was the most beautiful place we've ever been to? And to see children that are developing and looking at gray rust walls and they have nothing to read impacted me. And also, I was the choir director and the music person at a church down the road because they had no one else. It's not because I was so good, but I had a keyboard, okay? And I was playing music, and the pastor asked me to put together a Christmas program, and I said, sure, So in my good old middle-class way, I went and bought sheets and doing the Christmas cantata. Do you remember those days?
Yeah.
And gave out all this stuff, and they couldn't get it. I mean, we're talking simple stuff, Silent Night and all that. They couldn't get it until one day I looked, and a couple of them had their music sheets upside down. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I thought, the things that I take for granted. So we forgot about the paperwork, went straight into memorization, which, by the way, they can memorize more than I can any.
So they were just being polite and honoring you that you gave them the paper
yes.
and gave them the music. Wow.
So that's the other area, education. And
so now with the education, you have a sponsorship program. There's a child sponsorship program through ACE.
We do
now. Okay, how many kids do you
I think we have about 100, just under 200.
Okay.
Now, COVID has set us back a little bit. We're moving on up, and Devon can share a little bit about that because he's our child sponsorship coordinator, senior coordinator.
Awesome. Yeah, you guys are going to hear from Devon in just a few minutes. He's going to jump in, and I want
to. We do the McDonald's marketing strategy, and that is, you get the kids and the parents will come.
Yeah.
We don't go deep, we go wide. We're not anywhere else but in St. Mary. We found that it's very difficult to try and transform a community and change lives when you're an adult. That does happen, but if you can train up the children and you can help them read and write, you can also help them in their wellness. We have children embraces. We have children that have had their tonsils out. That's stuff that our sponsors help, and they finance, which is amazing.
It's
We've
incredible.
had homes built. So that is our continual learning. And then our micro businesses, we are so grateful that God has allowed us to buy an 838-acre farm.
So catch me up in the progress. Let's circle back
Yeah.
so I can know so everybody can know where we are, because this story is so amazing. You launch healthcare, then you start getting into the school system, and then you're still flying back and forth to the U.S., right?
Yes.
And then you meet Alan.
Now
can we bring it? Because
yes.
at this point of the journey, I've known Alan for some years now, over a decade, and he's such an instrumental part of what you do. And it's always amazed me how much he loves to serve. And every trip, I wish he was sitting here. He's in the room, guys. But every trip that I've been down, the last 3 or 4 trips I've been down, I'll see Alan at the end of the day, and he's covered in mud, and he's just like off a bulldozer or something. And it's been so cool for me to see how God, through trauma, through heartache, through years of no doubt loneliness. Like God has brought into your life. God brought into your life, not that he had to, but God wanted to gift you with a helpmate and someone that would partner with you in ministry and love the things that you love. And so just tell me, because I love the story, and I think other people love the story. I think it was a Starbucks. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I have to back up because after being married twice, I said, I'm done. That's it. And I'm sure God laughed and said, no, you've just begun. We needed to get some of the old stuff off of you. And it was Valentine's weekend. I don't remember what year. I know it was over 21 years ago, but I had a friend in Charlotte and I went up to see her. She had just had a baby and she was, we were in the mall and she wanted me to sit there and watch the baby while she went into the store to buy her husband a card. So I'm sitting in the mall and I have the baby in the stroller, and I see this couple walking. They look like a high school couple, and they were holding hands, and and I had been single for 7 years, and I had said, Lord, I'd like to have someone. You go from I'm never getting married to and it is lonely. At that very moment, that second, God said, I will give you Alan. Now, I tell people...
This is awesome.
Yeah.
This is wild.
And I tell people, I don't know if it was the baby talking. No, but that is exactly, and I've learned to hear when God speaks. And so I also believe that when you know that God speaks, you go ahead and you tell somebody to hold you accountable. And I always put it on a shelf because if it's true, it'll happen. And if not, it was just bad, Subway burger or something, So Wendy came out and I said, I want to tell you, this is what God just told me. And I said, I want you to know this so that when it happens, if it happens, I'm the one that told you this. Well, we went on and I was still in counseling. And hopefully doing better by now because we were coming at the end of the budget. And I told Greg, I said, this is back in Georgia, I told Greg the same story. And I had dated a guy named Alan, but he didn't.
So you told your counselor that God told you were going to marry Alan?
Yes.
What'd your counselor say?
Well, by this time, he knew that I was probably, short a half sandwich from being a full picnic.
Gotcha.
So he just was like, okay, Marla, let's keep going. No, he I think, liked my honesty. And I'm not afraid to say I made a mistake. But I told him that and went on. That was 2000 and actually it was I think it was 2000. And then 9/11 had hit, and the travel agency, you know how all that was, everything just went dead. But I had thought, well, I had met this Alan guy. I had dated him a little bit. Maybe that was going to happen, but it didn't. So I wasn't pursuing it. I went on. Everything's great. I tell people, if you're desperate and you tell people you want to go serve God because you're in debt or because somebody's stalking you or because you've lost something, you need to slow down. You need to wait because God's not doing it that way. Mm. And I was at peace. I really was. And then I would fly back up to Atlanta because my church was in Atlanta. And I met Alan at Starbucks. It was pouring down rain, and I said we could really. Now this is where he'll tell you a different story on who. But I was sitting there waiting on a friend to get out so the two of us could go and do some things, and had my hair looking bad. It was pouring rain. The place was full. I'm eating a carrot, cake with coffee, and I see this really good-looking black car drive through. And this good-looking man with this Oxford shirt just comes walking in. And I thought, that guy must be pretty good. Yeah. There wasn't any other spot around. And he comes over and he asked if the seat was open. And so that's when we met and when we started talking. And we went from there to, I had invited him to come to church. Our church does a celebration like once a month at night, and I had called. My parents, I know this sounds funny, but my parents said never give your phone number to anybody. You can get their number and you can call them as an adult, but you don't just give your phone number out to anybody. And so he wanted my number, and I said, well, let me have yours. And I think he was a little put off by that. But anyway, so I called and asked if he wanted to come to church with me. And he said that night, and he said, no, I'm cleaning out my garage. I thought, oh, okay, I see how it is, And so I just had decided that's okay. And then he called back and said he would come. And that night we were in church, and it was just kind of all gelled together. And
it's awesome.
Yeah. And so we were married 3 months later.
And so now this is important because you are married 3 months later, but the work in Jamaica continued. And Alan was still working in America.
Alan was paying our bills.
Gotcha.
Yes. What Travel Team Brokers was doing came to a quick end after 9/11. And I wasn't paying myself anything, and we were just coming together as a full ministry. We had help getting our 501c3 and all that. So I was going back and forth, and Alan was working with Volkswagen. He had been with them for 37 years. And if it had not been for him, I don't think I could have stayed. So he was graciously working hard. We were doing this alone. And I would see him maybe once every 10 days, 2 weeks. And he would come down, and his mother came to live with us soon after we were married, and is still living with us. She's 90 years old, Miss Betty.
Yeah.
So, there was a lot of things working, and yet at the same time, I'll never forget when I took him in to see Greg. Greg looks at Alan and says, so this is your Alan. And I did know that day when I met him that God had said, this is your Alan.
Wow.
And so I have to remember that when I get mad at him,
Take out the trash or something. This is my Alan. All right, God.
Yeah. Okay, you're driving too fast. Yeah, this is the Alan. So anyway, that's it.
So from that point, you get to a place where you see God as building Ace. Like it's clear, Galena Breeze comes in. This is another part, the micro business. Now, you told us a little bit about the education, child sponsorship, a little bit about healthcare. The micro business is what was so fascinating to me, because you really grabbed a hold of the idea that I don't want to take anything from the Jamaican people. I want everything that we do to be a deposit.
Yes.
Like I want to invest in the community. I want to invest in the commerce. I want to invest in the families. So just briefly, tell me a little bit about your strategy so people can understand, like, okay, there's this lady from America who now, like, Jamaica is home, has these micro businesses. What do they do, and how do they help the ministry?
This is the hardest part to convey to Americans, in my opinion. It started off with, we cannot give things away. Do not give money to people. Do not find your favorite Jamaican and offer to build them a house. Do not do that, because this creates strife and envy and jealousy among each other.
Gotcha.
And I kept thinking, how do we stimulate economies so that our nationals can pay and earn and support their families like we do here in the States? So at that time, we were leasing a hotel that was just a real bomb. It wasn't good at all. And I had a lady fall through the balcony because it was rotten, and I had kids wearing chicken boots in the bathtub because there was a little electrical spike in the water. So, we're doing all this stuff, and I'm standing out there. She had just fallen through and scraped her knee, and I just said, "All right, God, I am so sick and tired of this. If you don't do something, I am just going to go home." And I don't know if anybody else has made a fool of themselves like that, but that's kind of kind of what happened. So again, and I can't say that God speaks to me every day. I love it when I do hear his voice, because sometimes even I get shaky. But he said, I will give you trade winds. And I knew it was his voice because it was the same voice that said, "I will give you Alan." The next day, the gentleman who owns a hotel down the road comes up and asks for me and says, "I understand you want to buy a hotel." And I had not told anybody that. And he says, I grew up as a little boy here. I'm president of the Coconut Association. I'd love to show you this hotel. I bought it for my daughter from university. And she ended up marrying a man in Miami, and I'm not in the hotel business. Would you want to come see it? Went to see it. It was all broken down, closed down, had been empty for about 7 years on the sea. It was a mess. But the minute I drove through the gate with him, and Mr. Myers, by the way, was our security guy.
Oh, wow.
It was as if God just showed me everything completed the way you see it or the way people see it. Going forward, he leased it to us for $2,000 US a month, didn't give us a price, but said after those 3 years, we had first option to buy it. During that time, he tried to sell it any way he could, and nobody would buy it. I had people coming. God checks your pride every once in a while to make sure you're not going off the edge when he blesses you. And I would have a tendency to do that. And people would come up, missions pastors, and say, "Boy, this is a great place, and you're fixing it up. How much did you pay for it?" And we go, "Well, we don't have a price yet, "Okay, so what's the price?" "Well, we don't know yet." "So," and they would say, "You're fixing this up and you don't know the price?" And I would say, "Well, yeah." Every month we couldn't make $2,000. We couldn't do it because ACs would go out, everything would go out. And every time we fixed it, he would say, "Well, Marla, you owe that rent at the end." The end came, and about 6 months before we had to come up, meet with him to buy it, the pool regurgitated. This is a saltwater pool. And there was talk about, we'll just fill it in with dirt. Well, I don't know about you, but you don't come to a hotel in Jamaica and not have a pool. And so we decided just to go ahead. We had $13,000 and go ahead and fix the pool. But I wanted to put in the name of the hotel, the name that we would be naming it, Galena Breeze. And I'll never forget my husband just thinking, she has lost her mind. We don't own it. It's called Trade Winds, and we're going to put Galena Breeze in tile on the bottom of the pool. But to me, when God tells you he's going to give you something, you don't back out.
Yeah.
So we went forward with it. And
so you fixed the pool and you put your hotel name.
Our name in it.
In the tile.
Yes.
Before you bought it.
Before we bought it.
Before you knew a price.
Right, before we knew a price.
That's amazing.
And I had someone that I really respected, a big church in the Atlanta area. He came down and he said, "So how much are you buying it for?" And I thought, oh, here we go. And I said, "Well, we don't have that price yet." He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, we own it in the spirit realm, but it hasn't manifested yet in the natural." And I know how that goes. People look at you, they start recalculating if they really would put their trust in you and all that. And but that's okay. That's all right.
Well, this is cool too from sitting on my side of the table, because I remember for years we were driving down the road in Jamaica, and you would point at a piece of property and you would say, "God's going to give us that. God's going to give us that." And you would see, like, I was raised Pentecostal, so I'm like, yeah, let's sprinkle some oil on it and claim in Jesus' name. We can do this. I'm down. I serve at a Baptist church now, but I can get down with it. And it was so funny to me because my first trip in 2009, you said, God's going to give us this, and we're going to have a farm, and we're going to do this, and we're going to have a place where people can eat and people can be together and kids can be protected and can be safe. And I was like, man, what a big vision. And I could see people in the van on that trip being like, yeah, okay, whatever.
Oh, well.
And then like 5 years later, a piece of it was there. And now, 2009, now we're in 2023. And when you drive, through St. Mary out the other side, that property belongs to Ace.
Yes.
So I'm here saying to those of you listening, she might sound crazy if you're like super conservative Baptist, not really into the spiritual stuff, but I've seen it. Like I've been able to lay eyes on, and what I love about you, it's not a name it and claim it like some cheap theology. It's no, I'm going to pursue Jesus. I'm going to invest in this community. I'm going to trust God to do what He has already said.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, because I am not a name it and claim it, but I do try very hard to put myself out there for people that are struggling with faith.
Yeah.
Faith to me takes on a whole different level when you put your reputation out there. And I'm convinced that God wants us to put our reputation out there so that He can get all the credit for it. When that hotel came around and we were all praying, I just, we didn't have the money. And then when the guy came out with the money and the money, was there, it was sort of like, okay, well, how are we going to do this? And little by little, God would, those are all other God stories, and I don't want to go in and spend the rest of the day, but we closed and we're debt free. That is a place where people can come and relax. It's also, you can book it on booking.com.
Yeah.
We are a full hotel that serves our community.
And you employ nationals.
We have about 50 nationals employed now. We were up to 66 before COVID. Our goal is to have 300. And the average family is 5.6 people per earner, according to the stats in Jamaica. The hotel employs about 28 in and out. Then we go on to the farm. We have a campus. But what we do, ACE creates a business. We are able to teach, train, and these people do not have a lot of opportunity for education. So we train them from bottom up how to do this. We make chocolate. That's all coming off of our farm with the exception of the coffee, but it's in St. Mary. We help single mothers build confidence, see God working in their lives because they're mothers of the children that we've been sponsoring. We have about 100 head of cattle, beef cattle. We expect to have 300. The hotels, there's a huge demand for that. So everything is agriculture. We have a food court, which is jerk and pork. We have pizza, quesadillas, Devon House ice cream. We're the only ones in the area now, and we actually are the largest Devon House. That's like, I don't know, Ben & Jerry ice cream. I'm not sure. But we sell now the most of all, and that is sustaining us. So everybody, and we just had our first Peace House. That's the final part of our legacy while we've been training up our replacements, and that's Althea Foster. She has been kind of my understudy for 17 years, just went back, and Devon is also coming up, and they will be taking over as we fade. And I say not retire. We don't get old. We just step back, and we're the safety net.
I love that. In just a minute, we're going to transition and have Devon on and talk with him. But what I love and what I've seen is through this ministry, because it really is, I think some people, when they think ministry, they think, I have to be on the stage speaking or I have to be handing a track. But your ministry is a ministry that employs, invests, educates, provides health care. Like, ministry is everything that we do. And I think what I love about ACE, and we try to send our college kids every year to ACE because
and we are grateful for that.
Well, I think it lets them see, like, okay, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a salesman, I'm going to be a scientist. We have turf grass farmers.
Yeah.
In everything that you do, all of these things are ministry.
Yeah.
All of these things are a way to embrace people with the gospel of Jesus Christ and invest back into the world the gift that God has given you. And I think ACE has done such a good job of that, being able to put that in front of the community and make it tangible for churches. You know, having a place, it means a lot to me as a pastor to have a place where I can confidently send my people that I know that their hearts are being shepherded well, and they're also being given the truth. You know, like when you step on the campus at ACE, I mean, you're going to get tough love, you're going to get the truth. I mean, and you're going to get to be a part of a ministry that's working to serve the nationals, not to serve our own desire to feel satisfied on a mission trip or whatever, or
true.
for, poverty tourism.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for that ACE is really this picture of, okay, is this a business? Wait, there's people coming to faith in Jesus through this. This is a ministry. No, this is a business. No, it's a ministry. I think that's the way it's supposed to be.
I agree.
And it's such a beautiful thing to get to witness and watch and have watched growing over the years.
Well,
it's been incredible.
TJ, you have no idea how wonderful it's been for us to watch your ministry grow. When I look back and being able to be part of a ministry and see what God has done through you and Taylor and everybody here, getting to be able to grow with you all, and we're growing old, you're growing up, and to be able to just enjoy seeing God at work in a climate that is not for you.
Yeah.
And yet people are running towards that, and God is still heavily pursuing us. It's just a blessing for us too.
Awesome. Listen, thank you.
Oh,
thank you so much for sharing your heart and giving us just a snapshot. I'm telling you, give them real quick the website if they wanted more information. We didn't even get into, and we can get into this when we pull Devon on in a minute, but the internship programs, the whole 9 yards. But just give them the website real quick.
And we need
close
volunteers.
Out of this section.
We need lots of volunteers, whether you're by yourself, with a group. But our website is aceexperience.org. The name, or you can Google it, American Caribbean Experience. And we've got some really cool 1-minute videos on the front that I think sometimes help. You can just show people without going into all the detail. And we're just so grateful. We're so grateful for you and your church as well.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the TJ Mauldin Leadership Podcast, where we talk about life, leadership, and the gospel. If you enjoyed this episode, share with a friend. For more content, follow us on Instagram and YouTube. If you have any questions you would like to ask TJ, whether it is about life, leadership, or the gospel, you can email those to tjmauldinleadershippodcast@gmail.com. Thank you again for listening, and we hope you join us again on the TJ Mauldin Leadership Podcast.